right, Kalie, welcome to the show. Delighted to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
You're our first Panera person on the podcast, so I'm delighted to have you here. And delighted to kind of dive into your experience. I always like to start the podcast off by asking my guests, to tell us a bit about who they are, what they do, and how you got to where you are today. So, without further ado, if you don't mind kicking us off there, we get right into it.
Sure. So my name is Kalie Brackin. I am currently with Panera Bread. I'm a regional vice president for Panera Bread. We are getting underway in Utah. We just opened our first full service location about 8 months ago, and we have more under construction as we speak.
Wow.
How did I get to where I am now? Previously, I was with a Jimmy John's franchisee for just short of 10 years. And I got to where I am by developing people through the pipeline so that we were able to grow more locations and management teams and ultimately teams. And so that is exactly what brought me to where I am right now and what gave me my experience.
It's amazing. You mentioned just there, like developing people. Do you mean like in the sense of, we can dive right into this? So like your sort of leadership style. And did you do a lot of training when you were at Jimmy John's as well, to train people up to like become sort of like front of house to GMs? Is that what you mean by like training and development?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the restaurant world, I've seen some people think that restaurant work is kind of like a dirty word these days because so many people have gone to college to do all these fancy jobs and things. And so I think a lot of times we get entry-level people, right? We get younger kids who have never had a job before. And, some of those guys, if you put your time and effort into them, they go from your part-time high school, maybe they're a closing couple hours a night, maybe 10 hours a week person. You can actually take them and teach them what it takes to run a restaurant, and later they become really strong key players for you. So absolutely, every single day for me is a training day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. I hear a lot on the pod that like, 2 years ago, say, it was very much, we need bodies as fast as we can. And then it was like, hit the brakes. We need quality people.
Right.
And that has now kind of come all the way over to the conversation around retention in particular. And what I hear from people constantly is like, what retention really is great training programs for people and pointing out that there are career paths. Is that something that you take with you into your world of Panera now?
Absolutely. And I think Panera actually really does such a good job. From every aspect of training, it doesn't matter if you're just coming in to be a cashier or if you're working a line position where you're actually making the food. They have so many steps through the training program to where and even check-ins, with myself, I go in and I talk to people and I say, hey, how's your training going?
Yeah.
And I think that's an important step that a lot of people miss because they're not really looking out for that hourly employee. And, besides obviously our managers, like who really runs and interacts with most of your guests? That's your hourly person.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people miss the mark when they're not spending that extra time with them.
And like, what do you think, like, being responsible, say, for training and guiding sort of up and coming sort of stars, like how do you think about identifying the kinds of people that would make great GMs in a Panera Bread, for example? Like, what are the things you look for?
For me personally, I look for the it factor. And what I mean by the it factor, I think, okay, if I was that hourly team member and I'm coming in and this person is telling me, hey, this is how we do it and this is why, am I going to listen to that person or not? You know what I'm saying? And it goes, given the choice, would people follow you? Yes or no? And so when I see these people, when I go, wow, they're really informative when they talk to me and, they have really great composure. Like that is absolutely somebody that I would be willing to come in. And when they say, hey, this is what we need to get done today, I'm like, absolutely, let's get to work. And then there's some people that, you're not going to have that same reaction to. So for me personally, when I'm looking for, management style, I'm like, would I follow this person? Yes or no? Do I trust what they have to say? Yes or no? And that's the beginning
And
step.
yeah, and I guess it's like that's quite an intangible thing as well to measure. And I mean, you have many, many stores, so it must be quite difficult. Like, how do you like think about expediting that process, or do you have to be very hands-on with your GMs to identify those people?
You have to be hands-on, absolutely, because I think anybody can, uh, let's say, I think anybody can put on that show, right? Like if I walk into a building, the team knows who I am. I think a lot of people can put that show on, but not everyone can put on a show for a long time. So you have to be able to go in and see this, like this is a repeated behavior, and you have to see how other team members interact with that person. And if it's a positive thing and they're excited about it, then yeah, that's who I'm going for.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find like when I ask people about like, you know, yeah, you're referring to it as the it factor, and it's so interesting because I feel like everyone, it's hard to describe, but you know when you see it. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And I feel like everyone has a different kind of way of like describing it or looking for whatever it is. And it's one of those interesting ones that I find like, especially in hospitality, that it's like, you know, I guess yeah, corporate America, they'd be like figuring out ways to bucket people, bucket their personalities, bucket their motivations, bucket their sort of ambitions, to, like how they're determined are they, all those kind of things to kind of spit out a type of like style of person. Whereas, when we think about hospitality, we say it factor, it's like passion, it's like empathy, it's like do they care? It's like a bunch of things that like you really can't really measure, but when
Right.
you see it, I guess, Panera is an interesting one. I had a conversation with somebody from Panera, I mean, gosh, about a year ago. And I remember they were like, we're like a real first choice for lots of like teenagers and first job applicants, because she made the comment that it's like, it's not like you're going to smell like a frying oven. Like when you leave the place, like it smells, it's a very comfortable environment to be in. Does that help in terms of attracting people to come to the store as well? The actual product that you sell?
I definitely think so. Before I joined Panera, I looked at several different brands. I
Yeah.
had different offers from different people. And at the end of the day, for me, and maybe this sounds silly, but it's really about, your brand. I thought, would I be proud to wear a certain brand on my polo every day?
Yeah.
And when I think of Panera Bread, I'm like, yeah, like they have one of the biggest loyalty programs in the country, across all platforms. I'm like, yeah, I would totally be proud to wear that brand on my shirt every day. And so I definitely think that has a factor. It's part of the food. We don't have late nights. We don't have those fryers, like you said.
Yeah.
We have clean ingredients. It's easy to talk about why we love the food. It tastes great. It's it's definitely a factor, and I think kids more and more are paying attention to that too.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like I've heard that. I had a conversation with somebody about that, but also it's like I feel like I hear that in general, and especially for other kind of stores. Because my understanding as well is Paneras are typically in sort of typically, I say this is in inverse commas kind of way, because obviously I might not be exactly correct, but in kind of like slightly more elevated socioeconomic kind of neighborhoods that like you're able to kind of get the kind of there's just like you're able to kind of there's like a more money kind of vibe or something, or it feels a bit more premium is probably a way of putting it than like say other sort of brands in the space that you'd be competing for a lot of talent for, I guess, especially for teenagers and youngers, because you guys really focus on sort of like teenagers and sort of like college jobs for a lot of the roles that you have in your sort of hourly. Am I right in understanding that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for all of the Paneras, but I know
Yeah.
just for me, right now we're doing a lot of market research and looking for the places to put those locations. And so, yeah, we typically do look for those areas that, I mean, these are people that are able to come and hang out with you. They come
Yeah.
maybe at this and they're there all the way through lunch, right? And not everybody has that kind of time in the day. So,
Yes.
yeah, I don't think it's it's not really a strategy per se, but it's more like, we know who wants Panera there, and
Yeah.
that's what we're going for.
Totally. And then I guess that engenders the type of loyalty you were mentioning earlier. I mean, when you talk like loyalty programs are so fascinating because they're literally like you open up NRN or you open up QSR magazine or you open up you read any of the online and it's like loyalty, loyalty, loyalty. Like everyone is kind of getting into loyalty.
Right.
And I was actually reading about some guy at McDonald's who's you can see publicly who's got the most points in McDonald's, which I thought was kind of funny. So there's like a ranking of people, and this guy's got like 1,000,000 points or something, which is like
Yeah.
1,000 self-serve ice creams or self-serve ice creams or something with all those points, and it was like just a lull. But when I think about loyalty programs, and especially for you as like sort of an operations lead yourself, like where do you see them kind of evolving to? How do you see the value of a loyalty program today for something like Panera?
So, I mean, I guess I kind of see it a little bit differently than probably most people do. My personal value out of a loyalty program is that when I, go to a register or they say, "Are you a member with us?" and they put in my name and they see, "Hey, yeah, you've been here for a long time." And this goes from, I mean, this isn't just food, right? This goes with everything. I had to run into the parts store to grab some stuff for my side-by-side rig the other day. And they're like, "What's your phone number?" And I put it in and they're like, "Oh, we can see that you're a good customer for us." And it's like a comforting feeling, like, yeah, like even if you don't know me, you know me. And I don't think that there's enough of that in this world, like with social media and all those different things. People want to be recognized, known, they want to be highlighted for their loyalty and not just by like a discount or, something like that. Like it feels good to have somebody call you by name.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially like in a large sort of like franchise business, if I walked into Panera and you knew my name, I'd be like, whoa, okay, all right, this is awesome. I do think these loyalty programs are interesting. I think like there's still so much complexity to be ironed out with them. Like I had somebody say to me recently that like he goes to a particular type of ice cream store for his daughter to buy ice cream. And he's like, "I'm not really the customer, but my daughter is the customer, but I'm the one paying." And he's the one getting all the deals in like SMS. And it's like ironing out like these little factors like, okay, you want to like send the right message to the right person at the right time and really personalize that experience. And I still think we're kind of just a bit away from really nailing a lot of that. Obviously, it's different than say like a Panera where it's like, I mean, I don't know anybody who's like treating their kid to a bit of Panera Bread for breakfast. You know what I mean? In the way that like a soft serve ice cream might be or something. But like nailing the loyalty program, I think like given the investment that a lot of these companies are making, like say something like Panera is huge, and you're like the whole company is using sort of the loyalty program. It's like, do you in the stores that you look after, do you feel like it's having a tangible benefit on like repeat customer, for example? Like, do you see that in data already today?
I do. Yeah. And even with my prior company, my prior experience, they didn't have a loyalty program up until a few years ago. And when it rolled out, they're like, "Hey, here's all the benefits." These are like things that we know loyalty customers visit, however many times more. It's a lot more.
Yeah.
It kind of goes to that like 80-20 rule, which I'm sure you've heard about a bunch, like 20% of your efforts produce 80% of your results. Boom, that's your loyalty base right there. Even those people that are willing to sign up because they're like, "Oh yeah, I come here all the time, I may as well get something for it." Like those are the people that are coming back time after time after time.
Yeah.
And they're your best guest, really. I mean, because you're not paying any extra, money or putting out any extra resources to go get new people. They just keep coming back because they love to and they get a little kicker for it.
Totally. I mean, even my own personal experience, but I actually had an incident this week where a restaurant that will remain nameless, a chain that will remain nameless. I walked in and I was like, "Oh, where do I scan my the thing for my loyalty?" And they're like, "Oh, it only works for delivery or pickup." And I'm like, "But I came all the way to the store." I was like, "I came here," and I'm like, "Scan my thing." And they're like, "No, please don't." And I was like, in my head, I was like, "No."
Right? It's disappointing.
I am gonna go back, but I was like annoyed. I was like, I want them to know that I came, so that eventually there'll be some type of kickback, or I might get reminded of something, or because like I guess like it engenders a type of like custom that I think like it's more than the custom I look at for loyalty. Sorry, it is like what can you do with the data to unpack unique rockstar insights about your customers? Seeing that like there is a segment of people that come 5 times a month. But what about those people who come 5 times a month in terms of, say, the revenue they generate or the types of products they buy? And how do you innovate on those products? Or how do you think about, eking more revenue out of them? How do you get them incentivized to come a 6th and 7th time in a month? Like there's so much within the data that like you own that data. Like I think a lot about like say people talk about like Toast or all these other different sort of POS systems or whichever in restaurants. And it's
Right.
like you don't really own the data. Like that lives within their system,
Hmm.
but your own loyalty program gives you access to your own. And I think about this a lot because if you can synthesize that data for the GM so that they can understand within their location what's going on in terms of like loyalty of people coming into the store, coming in 5 times, like knowing that your best customers come in the morning, and
Right.
at certain times in the morning, it's like, okay, how do you design the store experience for them? How do you like encourage them to come in the afternoon? All this kind of stuff is like, for me, is so empowering for GMs. And I think about that a lot because my question to you is like, how do you think the role of the GM in something like a Panera or like Jimmy John's has changed even since COVID? I feel like there's way more expected of them now.
You feel like there's way more expected of them now? I honestly, I mean, the role has changed. It used to be a little bit different. Like, 10 years ago when I was a general manager, 11 years ago, I could, people, they didn't come in and expect quite so much. And I don't think it's really the role that has changed. I think it's the people that are coming to work have changed.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Does that
And it
make sense?
stays, it does, and I'm curious what you're
Yeah.
getting at because I think I know what you're getting at, but I want to hear you say it.
So let's just say, like with COVID, so many different types of benefits started coming out. People are like wanting to work from home and doing, getting certain types of, counseling, because that was a hard time, I think, for everybody. It doesn't matter what you were up to at that time. It was a hard time. And they're asking for, mental health counseling and like, just different things. And who's the first point of contact, right? Every company has an HR department. They have all these different things, but who is the one that takes the wrath of that? It's going to be your general manager every time,
Yeah.
right? Because they really filter and funnel the information from the big population of people up into those other departments. And so I think that, I mean, really the role has only changed because people's expectations have changed. They want different benefits, they have different pay expectations. And, as a general manager, you can control a lot, but you can't control everything. You can't say, yeah, we're going to roll out health benefits or mental health benefits to every single person. I mean, you just don't have that power, but people are bringing those things to you. So I really think the biggest change for general managers has been mental. It's been able
Yeah.
to hear hear people's concerns and what they've got going on with their lives, and then being able to say, hey, like, I'm going to be an advocate for you, but then actually turn around and have to advocate for them. I mean, that's a tough thing. Where when I was a GM 10 years ago, nobody was saying, hey, I feel like I need mental health benefit. That just was never a conversation for me. It was really just kind of down to business. And, that was that. Social media wasn't even as big as it is now. So it's changed. It's more of a mental game now.
Yeah. And is that like a Gen Z kind of thought in your head as well, that they're just a different kettle of fish as well, that are now like how to manage and communicate with them?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know, when's the last time you saw a paper boy throwing the paper, right? Like, things have just changed. You used to have to greet those people or talk to them, or maybe, you walk out and give them a bottle of water and a tip or something. And now, I mean, you don't see that anymore. So everything has changed, and that's with, just the development of the world, I guess, which which is okay. I mean, some people are like, oh, things just aren't the way they used to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be like that, but we still have to teach those skills, right? Personal skills. A lot of kids come to me now that are brilliant kids, but they don't know how to count change. And that's not necessarily their fault. It's just kind of one of those things that you go, okay, like, I guess we need to teach them that, and that's all right.
What's interesting? I never thought about the change thing. Not one person's ever said about the change, and I'm sure other people in your position have definitely been through that as well. So, like, literally, when they use the register, they're so used to digital payments and stuff that when the register kicks open, and somebody gives them a 5, and it's like, okay, your change is 27 cents. That they're like, which is the quarter, and then the
Right.
dime or whichever, you know what I mean, or a nickel.
Yeah.
And
Or even doing a missed key and they accidentally hit exact change and they really got a $20 bill and they're like, how do I figure this out? And you're like, just grab your calculator really quick, you know? It's to me, some people get frustrated with those kind of things. I think it's exciting because we get to
yeah.
teach them skills that, they didn't have.
And I guess, the kind of one of the big things is just the tenor and tone of communication. Like you talk about, like, say 10 years ago, for example, like nobody would ever mention mental health. And I would agree with you on that context. I don't think anybody ever in any real capacity ever really spoke about it. But now, obviously, especially post COVID, it's very much front and center. I mean, in one sense, it makes for a less stressful work environment because you're like, okay, we need to consider people as people.
Yes,
Like,
yes, absolutely.
like healthy mind, healthy body, mens sana, corpore sana, whatever they say in Latin. And I think about that a lot in terms of like how benefits have evolved for people who work in restaurants. I mean, one of the observations I have from doing probably the guts of 100 episodes of this now is like hearing from people, and like pre-COVID benefits existed in particular in sort of large organizations, less so for like hourly staff, and less kind of sort of emphasis on them, if that makes sense. Like coming here to work because of the benefits was not really a pitch in 2019, whereas now it's very much front and center of like how you acquire like hourly staff, even that like you need to lean into the fact that yes, we have competitive pay, but also we have benefits. Have you
Yeah.
seen that pendulum shift as well in terms of, you talk about the demands of people coming to work in the restaurant? Are people kind of really leaning into sort of asking more forthrightly about benefits?
You know, I haven't. And it really, like I said, just depends on kind of who you're dealing with. No two people are the same. Some might come and say, hey, I really care about having health care. And that's probably because of what, maybe their family history. You don't know or you don't need to know, but like one person, they're like, yes, I absolutely need these benefits. Another person's like, I don't care about that. I just want to make more money today. You know what I mean? So it really just depends. And I think in restaurants, typically, I'm not full service, so I think typically we just deal with a younger crowd, and they aren't really concerned with healthcare as much, or maybe a 401k. But I still, again, in my role as, a mentor, I bring those things up to them. I say, you're 18 years old. If you start participating in a 401k now, you're going to have a comfortable retirement down the road. And they're like, what's a 401k? So that to me is just like it's just another exciting thing that like, I don't have my own children. And so any of these kids that come to work for me, I feel an obligation
Yeah.
to teach them some things. And so I'd love to educate them on what's a 401k, how do I participate, how do I, do XYZ. I love that. I think it's just as rewarding as any other part of the job is to me.
Which is awesome. And like, I mean, I wish I knew that when I moved to America, and I'm also an adult. Let me tell you, I guess, what are the largest challenges facing you now then in terms of like, say for the rest of 2024, like what do you think are kind of large challenges facing you as like an operator?
Let's see. Some of the challenges that I think that we are facing right now. I mean, you said that you see the NRN emails probably every morning, just like I do. Right now, honestly, I think the economy is probably our biggest challenge. Groceries are still expensive and eating out is still expensive. And, you know, the most difficult for me is, again, just that education, right? Because, maybe you have a guest that's talking to a person that works at the register, and, not often, but some of those people are like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive. And that person right there, they don't know what to say, right?
Yeah.
They're probably not buying groceries for their household, or, so I mean, really that is continuing to be kind of just a tough thing. And I know that the word out there is that inflation has slowed down, but they have also started leaving some very crucial elements out of the equation. So they could say that. And so it hasn't. I can tell you our trucks are just as expensive as they've ever been. And So, I mean, personally, I think that that's the most challenging thing right now. And, we obviously, nobody wants to take advantage of another person. And I think that that's the perception of some people out there is like, oh, these restaurants are just taking advantage. Um, you know, I'm probably not supposed to say, so I'll just say a restaurant. I've seen a restaurant was out there, and like the ticket was like $24 for one
Yeah,
person.
this has been referenced so many times on my podcast, and nobody wants to say who it is, but we all know because we all saw it on Twitter and we all saw it on
Yes, you all
Instagram.
know who it is. And in my mind, just because I mean, I grew up in a restaurant. My parents opened their first restaurant on my first birthday. So I've
Wow.
literally been in restaurants my entire life, pretty much. And I'm like, nobody goes into the restaurant business to just get filthy rich, right? You're trying to make a decent living. Like, that is not happening. And I'm like, yeah, it's probably because they source really good ingredients. They use certain oils to cook their stuff. Like, they could do it a lot cheaper, but because they care so much, they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And then become enemy number one. And I just, if anything, I wish I could just educate other people on why the things are so expensive. And if you want them to be cheap, then you can go to places where a hamburger's $2.
That's the thing. I think it's like the perception. I think for that Wink and a Nod brand that we were referencing that had a very expensive ticket, I think what goes viral about that is the stores individually set their prices. And so they're within bands. So as opposed to corporate setting that price. And the location of where that was in a very super premium location, coupled with the fact that it wasn't just like the one-off thing, it was the whole meal selection. But that narrative goes very viral, and I think we're seeing a lot of narratives go very viral online very quickly that like fast casual, quick service, the pricing is getting a bit kind of anti-family pricing, or there's like a growing narrative in that, like and it's interesting because, first of all, like you said, like the kid behind the register inside like Panera wouldn't know how to answer that question if you ask them like, why is it like this? And they're not
Yeah.
like economists. Do you know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah. They're
They're,
just not
they're not
confident in it.
designing the pricing,
Right.
exactly. And I think like the thing is Americans love to eat out,
Yeah.
and I think we've seen that in the rebound post-COVID. You know what I mean? That there are more people going back to eat out now than there basically was before COVID, which is great. You know what I mean? It's a great sign. You have franchises are blowing up now. Like there's so many locations. You just talked at the beginning of the episode, talk about like the amount of new stores that you have opening. The new stores you have opening in like this year. Like, I mean, it's so key. And it's like, there's all these new kinds of concepts that are kind of coming to market. So like in one sense, the industry is thriving. I think like, inflation for sure, I hear from a lot of people is an issue. I think it's creating a kind of consumer mindset of like being more wary of spending money, which we might think might impact sort of like people going to eat out. But then also like, I think like commodity prices, like inflation and the actual products that you guys buy have kind of evened out a bit. Like, I mean, I would imagine you guys sell a lot of avocados.
Yes. A lot.
I did a lot of avocados at like what crazy prices last year. You know what I mean? So it's like, and how that does impact businesses. And I think like regular people, as in non-hospitality people, don't realize that exists. You know what I mean? Like in like, so like you can be victim to like a random spike in XYZ and thus like your prices have to change. I think we're in for a curious time now, I think, with the consumer, because I think to your point about inflation, inflation went up this month actually. So yeah, so I mean, I guess like if they're trying to hide something, they're really struggling to do it because it ticked up. But I think like at the end of the day, I mean, like, we have to deal with the kind of market that we have. And ultimately it's like, how price conscious are people? Like they're not that broke that they can't afford it. So it gets back to having a great guest experience, I think. And why do people want to come to like Panera in the first place? So my question to you is, one of my final questions is, why should people go to Panera over anywhere else? Like,
Oh, that is such a good question. So, I mean, in Utah, we have a few concepts that are similar to Panera, but none that are just quite like it. So,
yeah,
you know, no other concept in the state that I'm aware of, except for maybe a couple onesie twosies downtown Salt Lake, actually have a bakery and a restaurant really combined into one that offers the variety that we have. And, coming next month, I'm really not allowed to say much about it, but there are so many things that are happening in the next month. And it's exactly, what we've been talking about with the loyalty members and value. Like, it's going to be a whole thing going on with the menu. They've got better options, more proteins for the money you pay. The prices aren't going up because we're going to put more proteins and different things like that. Like, it's really an exciting time. And that's, part of the value of the loyalty programs is that you get to have a voice. And so I'm pretty excited. I mean, the whole focus of my last 2 months at work has been what's coming up. And so we're getting prepared for that. We've got, meetings. Every Panera, bakery cafe in the country is going to be having a meeting with their whole teams. We're going to be introducing new things. So yeah, I think the guests absolutely have a voice, and we are doing what they asked us to do. And that's why you should pick Panera, because they're listening to you.
Oh, hopefully not like Big Brother, but like they are.
Well, you say, hey, like there wasn't enough meat on my sandwich. We heard you. We're gonna put more.
All right, we heard you. All right, there's more meat coming. You broke us down. Okay, that's awesome, Kalie. And honestly, I appreciate you coming on the show here. And look, we've gone through almost 40 minutes of this. Can you believe that?
No, I can't actually.
Yeah, I told you you'd be surprised. That's awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, and I appreciate everything that you did today for me to give me this incredible insight into Panera. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.